The toddler's cries tore through the cabin like broken glass, drawing stares of irritation and whispers of judgment. The millionaire CEO, with all his wealth and power, sat powerless, until a poor boy across the aisle stood up and did the unthinkable. The cabin lights dimmed as the engines roared to life. First-class passengers sipped champagne, while in the main cabin, the air was thick with impatience. A toddler's wail rose above the hum of the engines, sharp and relentless. Julian Hart pressed his palm against his forehead, his jaw tightening as he tried to comfort the small boy squirming in his lap. "It's okay, Liam. Daddy's here," he whispered, his voice low but trembling. Liam was only 3 years old, his round cheeks wet with tears, his body tense and rigid from sensory overload. For a child on the autism spectrum, the chaos of takeoff, the rumble, the pressure change, the strange voices, was unbearable. Julian rocked him gently, murmuring words that once soothed him at home. But on this plane, surrounded by strangers, nothing worked. Liam cried harder, arching his back, flailing tiny fists against his father's chest. A sigh escaped from the row behind them. A woman muttered to her husband, loud enough for Julian to hear. Unbelievable. First-class money, and he can't even control his own kid. Julian's face burned. He didn't turn around. He had endured whispers like this before, at restaurants, at business events, even in his own boardroom, where employees questioned how a man so powerful could appear so human, so flawed. But here, trapped in the cabin with nowhere to escape, the judgment cut deeper. He stroked Liam's hair, his own shirt damp with the boy's tears. His wealth couldn't quiet his child. His status couldn't shield him from the sting of humiliation. And inside, where no one could see, a voice whispered the cruelest thought of all: maybe I'm failing him. At the far end of coach, a boy sat alone in the middle seat, a frayed backpack at his feet. His name was Malik Carter, 12 years old, wiry and quiet, his dark eyes observant. The headphones around his neck weren't connected to anything. He'd borrowed them from a friend just to look like he belonged. Malik had never flown before. The ticket wasn't his. It was a charity voucher given by his community center, sending underprivileged kids to a summer camp across the country. His mother had cried when she handed it to him, hugging him tighter than usual. She worked double shifts as a cleaner, often too tired to sit with him at night. Malik carried her strength in his chest like a secret fire, though sometimes, when the lights went out, the fire dimmed, and loneliness filled the silence. From his seat, Malik noticed the man in the tailored suit up front struggling with the toddler. Everyone noticed. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, rolling eyes, sighing. But Malik's gaze lingered longer than most. He recognized the look in the little boy's eyes, panic, fear, the kind that made your chest feel too small for air. He'd seen it in his own reflection after nights when the hunger in his stomach kept him awake. The boy didn't look spoiled. He looked scared. Julian bounced Liam harder, desperate now, whispering apologies to the people glaring around him. He felt the weight of every stare. Once, he had been admired, Julian Hart, the tech genius who turned a small startup into a billion-dollar empire. People called him a visionary, a leader. But here he was, reduced to a man who couldn't ease his own child's pain. The flight attendant approached, her smile tight. "Sir, is there anything we can do? Maybe a walk down the aisle?" Julian nodded, though humiliation pricked at him. He stood, clutching Liam, and began pacing the narrow aisle. Liam screamed louder, his fists beating against his father's collarbone. The crying echoed through the plane, a soundtrack of helplessness. Passengers turned away, shaking heads. One man muttered, "Should have hired a nanny if he can't handle it." Julian bit down on the words burning in his throat. No one knew the truth, that Liam's mother had left before his first birthday, unable to handle the challenges of raising a child with autism. That every night since, Julian had been both father and mother, comforter and protector. That his heart broke every time he saw his son struggle in a world too loud, too bright, too unforgiving. He stopped in the aisle, rocking the boy, his vision blurring. For the first time in years, Julian felt something foreign rise in his chest. Not anger, not frustration. Something closer to surrender. From his seat, Malik hesitated. His hands fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. Something inside him stirred, a pull he didn't understand. He'd spent his life on the receiving end of pity, the boy with hand-me-down shoes, the one who ate lunch alone. No one ever expected anything of him. But watching the toddler scream and the man's face collapse under invisible weight, Malik felt compelled. He stood halfway, then sat back down. What could he possibly do? He was just a poor kid from the South Side. That man up there probably had more money in his watch than Malik's family would ever see. Still, Malik remembered being 5 years old, crying in a grocery store because he lost sight of his mom. No one helped him, no one cared. Except a stranger, a cashier who bent down, took his hand, and stayed with him until his mother returned. That moment had stuck like glue. And now, he wondered, could he be that hand for someone else? Julian sank back into his seat, defeated, Liam still sobbing in his arms. He pressed his lips to his son's temple and closed his eyes. His empire, his billions, his power, none of it mattered in this moment. He felt like a man drowning while the world watched. And just then, the boy in the middle row unbuckled his seatbelt. He rose quietly, heart pounding, and began to walk up the aisle. Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you're ready to dive into this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Because tomorrow, I'll be sharing another story that's just as captivating, and you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get started. The cabin air felt heavy, charged with impatience. The hum of the engines blended with whispers and groans as Julian cradled his screaming son. His face was pale, his eyes clouded with exhaustion. Every instinct screamed to disappear, to shield Liam from the stares that pierced like knives. But then, amid the sea of judgment, one figure stepped forward. Malik. His sneakers squeaked softly on the aisle floor as he walked toward the front, each step heavier than the last. His palms sweated, and doubt rattled in his head. What if they tell me to sit down? What if I make it worse? Julian noticed him first, a small boy alone, his clothes worn but neat, standing just beside their row. He looked out of place, out of time. Julian blinked, confused. Can I? Malik's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. Can I try something? The words sounded absurd, almost laughable. What could this child possibly do that Julian couldn't? He opened his mouth to send him away gently, but the desperation in Malik's dark eyes stopped him cold. It wasn't pity. It wasn't intrusion. It was recognition. Julian hesitated, then nodded faintly. Go ahead. Malik crouched low, lowering himself until he was eye level with Liam. He didn't reach out immediately. He knew better. He simply sat back on his heels, folding his hands in his lap, waiting. Liam wailed, his fists pounding against his father's chest, his little body trembling. But then, through tear-swollen eyes, he noticed someone new in his space. The cries softened for a heartbeat, curiosity flickering. Malik whispered gently, almost like he was sharing a secret. Hey, little man. You're safe. He pulled something from his pocket, a small, battered action figure missing one arm. It was the only toy Malik had carried on the trip, a gift from his late grandfather. He held it up, not forcing it into Liam's hands, just showing it like an offering. This guy's been through a lot too, Malik said softly. See, he lost an arm, but he's still strong. Just like you. Julian froze, his heart hammering. Liam's cries hiccuped into silence. His little hand reached out, hesitant, trembling, then snatched the toy. He turned it over, studying it. His breath came in uneven gasps, but the screaming stopped. The plane grew still. Passengers glanced over their shoulders, shocked. The same people who moments ago sighed and groaned now sat wide-eyed, watching a miracle unfold. Julian's throat tightened. He had tried everything, songs, rocking, whispered promises, and failed. Yet here was this boy, a stranger, who had done the unthinkable with nothing but patience and a broken toy. How? Julian whispered, unable to finish the question. Malik looked up at him, his expression calm but older than his years. Sometimes, he said simply, you just gotta meet them where they are. Julian swallowed hard, his chest aching. Meet them where they are. The words landed like a stone in water, rippling outward. Liam clutched the toy to his chest, rocking slightly. His cries quieted into soft sniffles. The storm had passed, leaving behind only silence and the sound of his small breaths. Julian whispered, thank you. But Malik shook his head. Don't thank me. Just be here with him. The flight attendant approached, her eyes wide, her voice hushed. That was incredible. Young man, would you like to sit with them for a bit? Julian blinked, surprised, but nodded quickly. Yes, please. Malik slid into the empty seat beside them, his posture awkward but determined. Liam leaned against him, still clutching the toy, as if Malik had been part of his world all along. For the first time in hours, Julian let himself breathe. He studied the boy beside him, the frayed backpack, the two big sneakers, the quiet strength, and felt something stir deep inside. This boy was more than a stranger. He was a lifeline. The rest of the cabin seemed to exhale as well. Conversations resumed, headphones went back in, irritation dissolved into quiet awe. No one dared mutter complaints anymore. Julian leaned closer, his voice low. "What's your name?" "Malik," the boy said simply. "I'm Julian. And this little guy's Liam." He glanced down at his son, now dozing lightly against Malik's shoulder. The sight nearly broke him, a piece he hadn't seen in months, all because of this boy. Julian's chest tightened with gratitude and something more complicated. Humility. Shame. Wonder. "You have a gift," he murmured. Malik shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "I just know what it feels like when nobody gets you. Sometimes you just need someone who does." The words pierced Julian's heart. He thought of boardrooms where his employees looked at him like a machine, of family dinners that no longer existed, of nights spent pacing the halls with a crying child utterly alone. Yes, he knew exactly what Malik meant. For the rest of the flight, Malik stayed with them. He told Liam quiet stories, made the toy fly through the air, and even hummed a lullaby his mother used to sing when he was little. Liam giggled, soft, fleeting, but real. And Julian watched, both awed and undone, wondering how a child who had so little could give so much. When the captain announced their descent, Julian realized he didn't want this connection to end. The wheels touched down, and as the plane taxied, Julian spoke softly. "Malik, after we land, would you let me thank you properly?" Malik frowned, shifting uncomfortably. "You don't have to. Really." "I know I don't," Julian said, his voice steady. "But I want to." Malik studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. As the passengers gathered their belongings, whispers rippled through the cabin, not of annoyance anymore, but of admiration. Strangers smiled at Malik, some even patting his shoulder as they passed. He lowered his gaze, unused to attention, but inside warmth bloomed. For the first time in his life, Malik felt seen. And Julian, clutching Liam's small hand in one of his own and gripping Malik's toy in the other, realized something had shifted inside him too. This wasn't just a boy who calmed his son. This was the beginning of something bigger. The seatbelt sign blinked off, and the cabin erupted in its usual chaos. Passengers standing too soon, bins clicking open, voices layered on top of one another. But Julian barely moved. He sat frozen with Liam asleep in his arms, Malik still beside him, the boy's toy resting loosely in the toddler's tiny grip. For the first time in hours, peace wrapped itself around Julian. And yet, as reality settled back in, so did resistance. The whispers from other passengers returned, this time tinged with admiration. "That boy was amazing. Did you see?" Calmed him right down. Maybe that man should hire him as a nanny. Julian's jaw tightened. Nanny. Babysitter. Helper. That wasn't what Malik was. He refused to let strangers reduce this boy to charity work. But at the same time, his own pride bristled. He was a man who had built empires, yet he couldn't quiet his own child without the help of a stranger, let alone a poor boy in ragged sneakers. It stung. As passengers shuffled out, Julian stood and adjusted Liam on his shoulder. Malik rose too, clutching his backpack straps nervously. The boy seemed smaller now, less like the miracle worker from 20 minutes ago, more like what he really was, a kid alone, uncertain. Julian cleared his throat. "Do you have someone waiting for you at the gate?" Malik hesitated, then shook his head. "Just supposed to take a shuttle to the camp. It's for, kids like me. They said it's good for the summer." Julian frowned. "You came alone?" Malik's shoulders lifted in a half shrug. "Yeah. Mom couldn't afford the ticket, but the community center covered it. She said it's a big chance for me." His voice faltered. "She works a lot." Something twisted in Julian's chest. He saw himself in boardrooms, glass offices, endless nights at his laptop, always working, always missing moments with Liam. For different reasons, maybe, but the result was the same. Children learning to grow without their parents by their side. They walked through the terminal together, Liam balanced on Julian's hip. People still stole glances at them, this unlikely trio. Julian's polished shoes clicked against the tile, a sharp contrast to Malik's worn sneakers that scuffed quietly with every step. At the baggage carousel, Julian turned to him. "Listen, I'd like to help you. Maybe I can call someone from your program, make sure you're looked after properly." Malik stiffened, his grip tightening on the straps of his backpack. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't need help." Julian blinked. "I didn't mean. I'm not some project." Malik's voice was sharp now, defensive. I know what people think when they look at me. Poor kid. Needs saving. But I don't. I was fine before, and I'll be fine after. Julian swallowed. The boy's words stung because they mirrored his own thoughts. How many times had he snapped at colleagues who pitted him for raising Liam alone? How many times had he told himself he didn't need anyone? Pride. It was the one thing they had in common. Julian exhaled, trying again. You're right. I shouldn't assume. But I can't just walk away, Malik. What you did back there, you gave me something I couldn't give my son. That matters. Malik's gaze softened, just a fraction. He shifted his weight, muttering, I didn't do it for you. I know, Julian replied quietly. That's what makes it mean even more. The silence between them stretched, fragile as glass. Liam stirred against his father's chest, mumbling softly in his sleep, still clutching the toy. The sight seemed to thaw something in Malik. He sighed. I just don't want you to look at me like everyone else does. Julian crouched slightly, lowering himself to Malik's eye level the way Malik had done for Liam. His voice was steady. I don't. I see a boy who stepped up when no one else did. That's rare. And it's powerful. Don't ever let anyone convince you it isn't. The announcement for shuttles echoed through the terminal. Malik shifted, glancing toward the exit. That's me, he said, pointing. Julian hesitated. He didn't want this connection to end here, in the fluorescent glare of baggage claim. Something inside him whispered that this boy had walked into his life for a reason. But how do you ask a stranger to stay when pride walls are already so high? He opened his mouth to speak, but Malik was already turning away. Thanks for letting me sit with you guys. Your kid's cool. Julian almost laughed at the understatement. So are you, he said softly. Malik gave a small nod, then started toward the shuttle signs. Julian stood frozen, watching him go. Liam stirred again, whimpering softly, still holding Malik's broken toy. Julian whispered to himself, don't let him walk away. But he didn't move. His feet were rooted, his pride tugging one way, his heart another. He was a man who solved problems with money, with contracts, with deals. He didn't know how to solve this. How to ask a boy he barely knew to stay in his life without making it feel like charity. So he let him walk. For now. As Malik disappeared into the crowd, Julian pressed a kiss to Liam's hair. The boy clutched the toy tighter in his sleep, and Julian knew. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Have you ever let pride stop you from asking for help? Even when you knew you needed it? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know. The shuttle parking lot was a storm of noise, honking horns, shouting drivers, engines coughing to life. Malik clutched the strap of his backpack, weaving through the crowd until he found the line of buses labeled for camp transfers. He paused at the steps of one, the doors yawning open like a mouth. His chest tightened. The camp director had told him it would be fun. Games. Swimming. A chance to be a kid, she'd said. But now, standing alone with no familiar faces, all Malik felt was the crushing weight of isolation. Behind him, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed across the pavement. Malik. He turned. Julian was jogging toward him, Liam perched on one arm, suitcase rolling behind. His expensive watch glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights of the lot. Malik frowned. What are you doing here? Julian stopped, breathless but determined. Your bus isn't safe. I can't just let you ride across the city alone. At least let me drive you. Malik's jaw tightened. I told you, I don't need help. Julian adjusted Liam, who was still drowsy, his little fists rubbing his eyes. I'm not saying you do. But my son won't let go of your toy, and, he hesitated, searching for words that didn't sound condescending. And maybe I just don't want to say goodbye yet. Something flickered across Malik's face, surprise, maybe even relief, but it disappeared behind practiced caution. Why? Julian's voice softened. Because you remind me of him. And because you did something for us I can't forget. Malik stared at him, suspicious. But then Liam, eyes barely open, lifted the toy toward Malik with a sleepy murmur. Stay. The word was quiet, but it pierced the night like a bell. Minutes later, Malik found himself buckled in the back seat of Julian's sleek black car, Liam beside him, still clutching his toy. The city lights streaked past the tinted windows as they drove toward the camp. The silence was thick at first. Malik stared out the window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. Julian gripped the wheel tightly, his mind racing with doubts. Had he overstepped? Was he pushing too hard? Finally, Malik broke the silence. Why'd you really come after me? Julian kept his eyes on the road. Because I know what it feels like to watch someone walk away when you're not ready. And I couldn't let it happen again. Again? Malik asked, glancing at him. Julian's throat tightened. He hadn't meant to say that. He thought of Liam's mother, the way she left without a word, without looking back. He forced a smile instead. Long story. The car jolted over a bump, and Liam stirred, pressing closer against Malik's side. Instinctively, Malik shifted, letting the boy's head rest on his shoulder. The small weight surprised him, fragile, trusting. Julian saw it in the rearview mirror. His chest ached with something he couldn't name. He had raised Liam alone for years, yet in this brief moment, the boy seemed more at peace than he had in months. And it wasn't Julian who gave him that. It was Malik. The unfairness of it twisted inside him. He should be enough for his son. But watching them together, he realized maybe enough wasn't about doing it all alone. Maybe it was about letting others in. Halfway to the camp, the car sputtered and slowed, the engine coughing like an old man. Julian cursed under his breath. Not tonight. They pulled over onto the shoulder. Liam whined, rubbing his eyes, while Malik leaned forward. What's wrong? Julian popped the hood, muttering. Overheated. We'll have to wait it out. So there they were, stranded on the side of the highway, the night air humming with cicadas. Forced to stop. Forced together. Julian spread his jacket on the grass near the guardrail, laying Liam down gently. Malik sat beside him, hugging his knees to his chest. For a while, they listened to the steady rhythm of Liam's breathing. Finally, Malik spoke. You look tired. Julian gave a humorless laugh. I am. But tired is my normal. Because of him? Malik asked, nodding toward Liam. Julian hesitated. Because of everything. Running a company. Raising a child who sees the world differently. Trying to be everything at once. Some days I feel like I'm failing all of it. The confession hung in the air, raw and unpolished. Malik's voice was quiet but steady. You're not failing him. He looked at you when he cried. That means he trusts you. That's not failing. Julian's throat closed. A boy half his age was telling him the very thing he'd needed to hear for years. Liam stirred in his sleep, whimpering. Without thinking, Malik reached over, humming softly, the same tune from the plane. Liam settled instantly. Julian watched, his chest tightening. You have a gift with him. Malik shrugged. I just know what it feels like to need someone. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Julian saw past the boy's pride and into the loneliness beneath. He realized this wasn't just about Liam. Malik was carrying wounds too, different, but just as deep. Headlights swept across them as another car passed. The world moved on, but the three of them sat still, bound together in an unlikely circle of need. Julian spoke softly. Maybe we could all use each other more than we think. Malik didn't answer, but he didn't move away either. And in the silence, something unspoken grew, fragile but real. The highway had quieted, the last rumble of passing cars fading into the night. Liam slept peacefully on Julian's jacket, his small hand still clutching the toy Malik had given him. The moonlight painted them in silver, fragile and serene. Julian sat cross-legged on the grass, his loosened tie draped around his neck. Across from him, Malik tugged nervously at the frayed strap of his backpack, his gaze fixed on the boy sleeping between them. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Julian's voice broke the silence. You know, when you comfort him like that, it's like watching magic. Malik shrugged. It's not magic. Just patience. People don't usually give kids like him that. Julian's brow furrowed. Kids like him. Malik hesitated. Different kids. Kids who don't fit. People think they're too much. Or not enough. I know what that feels like. The words hung in the air, heavy but unguarded. Julian leaned forward, curiosity flickering. What do you mean? Malik pulled his knees closer to his chest, eyes on the highway. My dad's gone. My mom works double shifts. I spend more time with neighbors than with family. Teachers say I'm smart, but smart doesn't fill the fridge. People look at me and just see the wrong things. Poor. Black. Trouble waiting to happen. Julian's chest tightened. The boy's voice wasn't angry. It was weary, like someone who'd lived more than his share of disappointments. That's not what I see, Julian said quietly. Malik gave him a doubtful glance. What do you see then? Julian studied him carefully. I see someone who calmed my son when I couldn't. Someone who didn't run when everyone else was judging. That doesn't sound like trouble to me. For the first time, Malik's hardened expression cracked, just slightly. But instead of answering, he shifted the spotlight. What about you? You look like you've got everything. So why do you look so sad? Julian inhaled sharply. He wasn't used to being asked that. People usually wanted things from him: money, favors, business deals. Not truth. Because I'm raising him alone, he admitted, nodding toward Liam. His mother left when he was barely a year old. Said she wasn't cut out for this life. For him, for me. She walked out and never came back. Malik's eyes widened. You never hear from her? Julian shook his head. Not once. Some nights, when Liam cries for her, I don't know what to say. I can build companies, negotiate deals worth millions, but I can't give him the one thing he wants most: a mother who stayed. His voice broke at the edges, raw with exhaustion and grief he rarely let surface. He rubbed a hand over his face, the mask of control slipping. Malik studied him with unexpected gentleness. That's not your fault. You're here. That's what matters. Julian swallowed hard. The boy's words echoed in his chest, stirring something fragile. He had spent so long trying to be everything, provider, protector, both parents at once, that he had forgotten the simple truth: being there mattered most. The stillness stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was the kind of quiet that follows after walls start to crack. Julian exhaled, his voice low. Do you know why I work so hard? Why I push myself until I can't breathe? Malik tilted his head. Because I'm terrified, Julian continued. Terrified that if I slow down, I'll lose everything. My company, my respect, my son's future. I think, maybe if I give him the world, it'll make up for the mother he lost. But lately, his gaze drifted to Liam's sleeping form. Lately, I wonder if what he really needs is just me. Not the CEO. Not the millionaire. Just me. Malik sat with that for a while, then nodded slowly. You're probably right. I mean, I'd give anything just to have my mom home at night. Not gifts. Not stuff. Just her. Julian felt a pang of recognition. They were mirrors, in a way. One boy without a father, one man without a partner. Both trying to fill holes too big for material things. A cool breeze rustled the trees, carrying the smell of asphalt and wild grass. Julian noticed Malik shivering and slipped off his suit jacket, offering it. Malik frowned. I don't need charity. It's not charity, Julian said softly. It's warmth. Take it. Reluctantly, Malik accepted. As he draped the jacket over his shoulders, his small frame seemed swallowed by the fabric, but he didn't push it away. For a moment, Julian saw not just a guarded teenager, but a child who had learned to protect himself too soon. They both turned as Liam murmured in his sleep, clutching tighter to the toy. His lips formed a single word. Mama. The sound pierced Julian's chest. He reached out, brushing his son's hair back. Malik's gaze softened. He still remembers her? Julian nodded, his voice heavy. Every day. There was nothing else to say. But Malik shifted closer, his presence quiet and steady, like an anchor in the storm. For the first time that night, Julian felt something he hadn't in years, not alone. He glanced at Malik, gratitude burning in his chest. Thank you for staying. For listening. Malik shrugged, but his voice was steady. Sometimes people just need someone to hear them. I get that. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, they both recognized the truth. They weren't just two strangers on a broken-down road. They were two souls carrying scars, finding a strange, unexpected comfort in each other's company. The night dragged on until dawn smeared the sky in soft pinks and oranges. Julian had dozed off briefly, his back against the cool metal of the car, but woke when Liam stirred, rubbing his eyes and reaching for him. Julian gathered his son into his arms, murmuring softly. Liam whimpered, still half dreaming, but then noticed Malik sitting cross-legged with Julian's jacket draped over him. The boy offered Liam a small smile and wiggled the toy car in his hand. Liam's lips quivered before breaking into the tiniest giggle. It was faint, fleeting, but it was laughter, something Julian hadn't heard in days. His chest tightened. You're really something, Julian whispered, watching Malik coax joy from his son like it was the most natural thing in the world. Malik shrugged. Kids like cars. Simple. But it wasn't simple. Julian knew that. It was patience, empathy, qualities money couldn't buy, yet somehow this boy carried them effortlessly. As daylight grew, Julian flagged down a passing tow truck. Within an hour, the car was loaded, and the driver offered them a ride back toward the city. Malik hesitated at the truck's step, clutching his worn backpack. Julian noticed. Where are you heading? Malik shifted, embarrassed. Bus station. Thought I'd crash at my cousin's. But, he trailed off, staring at the ground. Julian studied him carefully. You don't have to explain. Just come with us a little longer. I owe you that much. Malik frowned. I'm not looking for charity. Julian's voice was gentle but firm. It's not charity. It's thanks. After a pause, Malik climbed in. The ride was bumpy but oddly warm. Liam leaned against Julian's shoulder, clutching Malik's toy car. Every so often, his gaze darted to the boy, as if seeking reassurance. Malik noticed, and began making the car zoom across the truck seat with playful sound effects. Liam giggled again, the sound filling the cramped cab like sunlight. Julian found himself smiling, too, really smiling, for the first time in what felt like years. Later, back in the city, Julian insisted on treating Malik to breakfast. They ended up in a small diner, nothing fancy, just steaming pancakes and hot chocolate. Malik devoured his plate with the quiet hunger of someone used to skipping meals. Julian pretended not to notice at first, but then slid an extra plate of bacon toward him. Malik froze. I didn't ask for this. You didn't have to, Julian replied softly. Just eat. Malik's defenses flickered, then fell. He ate, and for a moment, looked less like a guarded boy and more like the kid he was allowed to be. As Liam doodled on a napkin with crayons the waitress had offered, Julian leaned forward. Malik, what do you want to be? When you're older. The boy blinked, caught off guard. Doesn't matter. People like me don't get choices. Julian shook his head. Everyone gets choices. Tell me anyway. Malik hesitated, then muttered. An engineer. Maybe. I like building stuff. Fixing things. But dreams cost money. Julian's throat tightened. He remembered being that age, full of ambition, though he'd had resources Malik didn't. Maybe dreams cost effort, Julian countered. An effort you've already proven you've got. Malik met his gaze, uncertainty warring with hope. No one had said that to him before. It showed in his eyes. By the time they left the diner, a quiet bond had woven itself around them. Not forced, not spoken aloud, but undeniable. As they walked toward Julian's building, Liam slipped his tiny hand into Malik's. Julian froze at the sight, something hot rising in his chest. He didn't interfere. He just watched, memorizing the moment. Inside the apartment, sunlight spilled across polished floors and towering windows. Malik hesitated at the threshold, clearly out of place in such wealth. Julian noticed his unease. It's just walls and windows. What matters is inside. Malik didn't answer, but his eyes softened as he glanced at Liam, who tugged him excitedly toward a box of toys. Hours blurred. The boy played with Liam, building towers of blocks, racing toy cars. For the first time in months, Julian saw his son fully engaged, laughter bubbling out in pure, uninhibited bursts. Julian leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching. Every laugh was like a thread stitching something broken inside him. At one point, Liam collapsed into Malik's lap, exhausted but smiling. Malik looked down at him with a tenderness that startled Julian. It was the kind of look he himself had worn countless nights rocking Liam to sleep. Something shifted then. Not just gratitude, not just admiration. Something deeper, scarier, trust. That evening, as the city lights blinked on, Julian joined Malik on the balcony. They stood side by side, overlooking the skyline. You know, Julian said, voice low, you've done more for us in 24 hours than most people in my life ever have. Malik gave him a sideways glance. I didn't do much. You did everything, Julian countered. You gave him peace. You gave me hope. There was silence, thick and heavy, but not uncomfortable. Malik stared out at the city, eyes shining faintly. Maybe that's what people like us are good for, giving what we never had. Julian's chest ached at the truth in those words. He wanted to say more, but he let the quiet hold them. For a fleeting moment, it felt like they weren't broken men and boys from opposite worlds. They were just a family, stitched together by circumstance, laughter, and fragile kindness. But deep down, Julian sensed it. The peace couldn't last forever. Something would come to test it. And when it did, the bond they had built today might be the only thing that could save them. The next morning began with sunlight spilling through Julian's penthouse windows, golden and warm. Liam woke early, babbling happily as he tugged Malik toward the playroom. Their laughter echoed down the hall, and for once, Julian felt something like peace. But peace never lasted. Not in his life. The knock came mid-morning, sharp, insistent. Julian opened the door to find Mrs. Ellison, his elderly neighbor, standing stiffly with her arms crossed. Behind her hovered the building's security guard. Mr. Rowe, she said coolly, her eyes darting past him. There's been concern. Residents saw a boy wandering in with you yesterday. A boy who doesn't belong here. Julian stiffened. He's a friend. Her gaze sharpened. He's a stranger. And this is a secure building. Do you know how dangerous it looks, bringing in someone like him? Her voice lingered on someone like him, dripping with prejudice. Before Julian could respond, Malik appeared at the hallway's end, holding Liam's hand. The moment Mrs. Ellison saw him, her lips pursed in disdain. Exactly what I mean, she muttered. You'd do well to think of your son's safety. Julian's jaw clenched. He wanted to snap back, to defend Malik. But the weight of her words pressed heavy. Your son's safety. What if letting this boy in really was reckless? What if people whispered? What if it hurt Liam in the long run? His silence was worse than words. Malik's eyes darkened. He had heard everything. Don't bother, he said flatly, pulling his backpack from the chair. I get it. Julian stepped forward. Malik, wait. But the boy's face was set, cold. You don't have to explain. She's right. I don't belong here. Liam's small voice broke the air. Malik. He tugged at his friend's sleeve, confusion in his eyes. Malik's jaw tightened. He crouched briefly, brushing Liam's hair back. Be good, okay? You've got a dad who loves you. That's enough. Then he straightened, slinging the backpack over his shoulder. Julian reached out instinctively, but Malik stepped back. You've got everything. You don't need me. The words cut like glass. And then he was gone. The apartment felt emptier than it had in years. Liam wandered the rooms calling Malik's name, his voice echoing heartbreak. Julian tried to soothe him, but nothing worked. He was inconsolable, wailing until his cheeks flushed. Julian felt the old helplessness creep back. Helpless like on that plane, like every night alone when Liam cried for a mother who wasn't there. Only this time, the pain was doubled. He had let someone in, and now he'd lost them. Days passed, each one heavier. Julian buried himself in work, chasing distraction, but his mind kept circling back to the balcony conversation, to the laughter at breakfast, to the way Malik had looked at Liam with real tenderness. He replayed the moment at the door 100 times. He should have defended him. Should have told Mrs. Ellison to keep her poison to herself. Should have stood firm. Instead, he had let silence speak for him. And Malik had heard everything he needed to know. One evening, Julian sat in Liam's room, watching his son clutch the toy car Malik had given him. Liam's eyes were puffy from crying. Daddy, he whispered. Where's Malik? Julian's throat closed. He tried to answer, but no words came. All he could do was gather his son into his arms and hold him as tears burned his own eyes. Malik, meanwhile, had retreated into his world. He slept on his cousin's couch, went to school during the day, and tried to ignore the ache in his chest. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Liam's face, confused and hurt. And beneath it all, another voice echoed, the voice of the woman at the door, dripping with judgment. Someone like him. He'd heard those words before, in 100 different forms. Teachers, strangers, shopkeepers, always reminding him of where he didn't belong. He had let himself believe Julian was different. But when it mattered, Julian had stayed silent. That silence screamed louder than anything else. By the end of the week, both were drowning in the same grief, but on opposite shores. Julian walked through his spotless apartment, every polished surface mocking him. Liam's laughter was gone. Malik's absence was a wound he didn't know how to mend. Malik sat on the edge of his cousin's bed, staring at the city skyline, Julian's oversized jacket still folded in his bag. He couldn't bring himself to wear it, couldn't bring himself to throw it away. The bond that had felt so unshakable had shattered in an instant, and neither knew how to pick up the pieces.
The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, horns blaring, lights flashing, strangers rushing. But for Julian, everything felt muted. His days blurred into boardrooms and phone calls, his nights into restless hours beside Liam's bed. Liam cried often, sometimes waking with Malik's name on his lips. Each time, Julian soothed him as best he could, but deep inside, shame gnawed at him. He replayed that moment at the door endlessly. Mrs. Ellison's venom, Malik's wounded eyes, his own silence. Silence that had screamed louder than prejudice. One evening, after another fruitless attempt to settle Liam, Julian stood alone on the balcony, staring at the sprawl of city lights. His reflection glimmered faintly in the glass, hollow-eyed and weary. For once, he admitted the truth aloud. I failed him. Both of them. The words hung heavy in the night air. Across the city, Malik sat on the bleachers of his school's cracked basketball court, backpack at his feet. The sounds of a distant game echoed, shoes squeaking, boys shouting, but he sat apart, head bowed. Julian's jacket was draped across his lap. He ran his fingers over the fabric absent-mindedly. He hated that he still kept it. Hated that he still cared. His cousin's words rang in his head. Forget that rich man. People like him don't care about kids like us. And yet, Malik remembered Liam's laughter, Julian's quiet gratitude, the way for a brief moment it had felt like he mattered. Why did it hurt so much to lose something he never even thought he could have? The next morning, Julian drove Liam to school, but lingered in the car afterward. His phone buzzed with emails, deals waiting, but he ignored them. Instead, he typed Malik's name into the search bar of the school district's database. It took longer than it should have, but finally, he found the boys' school. He stared at the address for a long time, fingers trembling. Would showing up make things worse? Would Malik even listen? Julian rubbed his temple. He had built an empire on decisive action, but here he was paralyzed. If I don't try, he whispered to himself, then I lose him forever. Meanwhile, Malik sat in class, staring out the window as his teacher's voice droned. His notebook lay untouched, except for a small doodle, a stick figure boy holding a smaller hand. He quickly closed it, heart twisting. During lunch, he slipped away to the edge of the playground. That's when he noticed a sleek black car parked across the street. Too polished for this neighborhood. The door opened. Julian stepped out. For a moment, Malik thought he was imagining it. The man looked out of place among the cracked sidewalks and peeling paint of the schoolyard. But his expression was raw. No mask, no CEO facade. Just a father desperate. Malik froze. His instincts screamed to turn, to walk away. But his feet didn't move. Julian approached slowly, as if afraid of spooking him. Malik, he began, voice rough. I know I have no right to ask you to listen. But please, just a minute. Malik crossed his arms, defensive. Why? So you can tell me I misunderstood? Pretend you weren't thinking exactly what she said. Julian flinched. No, you didn't misunderstand. You heard my silence. And you were right, it hurt. It was cowardly. I should have defended you. I should have defended us. The word us hung between them. Malik's eyes narrowed. Then why didn't you? Julian's voice cracked. Because I've spent my whole life controlling everything. What people see, what they say, how they respect me. And for a second, I was scared. Scared of losing that. Scared of giving them one more reason to judge me, to judge Liam. But I was wrong. Terribly wrong. The only thing worth protecting was you. Both of you. The honesty in his tone rattled Malik. He turned away, but his voice was softer. Words don't change things. Julian stepped closer. No, but choices do. And I'm choosing now, to fight for the people who matter. Even if it costs me everything else. There was a long silence. Kids' laughter echoed faintly across the yard. Malik's hands clenched at his sides, torn between the ache of betrayal and the pull of something he had never known before, being chosen. Finally, he whispered. And what if I can't trust you again? Julian's eyes glistened. Then I'll spend as long as it takes proving I'm worthy of it. Not because I owe you, but because you deserve it. Malik's chest rose and fell with shaky breaths. Part of him wanted to walk away, to protect himself. But another part, the part that had laughed over pancakes, that had held Liam's hand, longed to believe. He glanced at Julian, and for the first time in days, saw not the millionaire, not the stranger, but the man who had sat broken on the roadside and admitted his fears. You're really not going to give up, huh? Malik muttered. Julian shook his head. Not on you. Not ever. Something cracked open inside Malik. The walls he had built trembled. He let out a shaky laugh, half bitter, half hopeful. You're stubborn. You know that. Julian smiled faintly. So I've been told. At that moment, Liam came running across the yard, spotting them both. Malik, he shouted, his little arms reaching out. Malik's defenses melted as the boy barreled into him, wrapping tiny arms around his waist. He froze for a second, then hugged back, his throat tight. Julian watched, eyes wet, knowing the choice had been made, not with words, but with that embrace.
Autumn crept over the city, painting the trees gold and red. For Julian, life no longer blurred into endless meetings and hollow victories. Something new pulsed at the center of it, messy, unpredictable, but alive. Malik had started coming by the penthouse again, though cautiously at first. Julian didn't press. He just made space, letting the boy and Liam rebuild the rhythm they'd lost. The laughter returned, hesitant, then louder, filling the once sterile rooms with warmth. One evening, Malik sat cross-legged on the rug, while Liam piled blocks into a crooked tower. Julian watched from the couch, heart swelling at the simple sight. You know, Malik said suddenly, eyes on the blocks. I never thought I'd feel at home anywhere but my grandma's. But here it feels different. Like I belong. Julian's throat tightened. He leaned forward, voice soft. That's because you do. This isn't just my home anymore. It's ours. Malik looked up, startled. Julian's expression was steady, full of something deeper than obligation, something chosen. The change didn't go unnoticed by the outside world. When Julian was spotted at charity events with Malik and Liam, whispers rippled. Tabloids speculated, investors frowned. One board member even confronted him. A boy from the projects? You're risking your reputation, Julian. This isn't what a CEO does. Julian had stared him down, calm but fierce. Maybe not, but it's what a father does. And it's the only thing I care about. For the first time, he didn't flinch under scrutiny. The empire could crumble, and he would still stand. Weeks later, Malik's school held its fall talent showcase. Malik had signed up, something unthinkable just months ago. Julian sat in the crowded auditorium with Liam on his lap, nerves buzzing as the lights dimmed. Then Malik stepped onto the stage, clutching his guitar. He glanced into the audience, eyes searching, and landed on Julian and Liam in the front row. Julian nodded once, steady and proud. Malik exhaled and began to play. The melody was simple, imperfect, but carried raw emotion. Hope stitched with pain, strength woven with vulnerability. The room hushed, drawn in by the boy who dared to bare his heart. When he finished, silence hung for a beat, then the audience erupted in applause. Malik's cheeks flushed, but his eyes shone brighter than the stage lights. Julian clapped until his hands ached. Liam shouted, "That's my Malik!" And the crowd laughed warmly. Afterward, outside beneath the crisp night sky, Malik leaned against Julian's car, guitar case at his feet. "Didn't think I'd make it through without messing up," he said, half smiling. Julian crouched beside him. "You didn't just make it through, you owned it. You're braver than I'll ever be." Malik shrugged, but his voice was soft. "I only did it 'cause I knew you'd be there. Both of you." Julian's chest tightened with pride and something deeper. A fierce love that no contract or headline could touch. "And I always will be." That night, as Liam drifted to sleep, Julian tucked him in and found Malik standing at the balcony, gazing at the city lights. "You okay?" Julian asked. Malik nodded slowly. "Yeah, just thinking about how different life is now. Sometimes I still wonder if I'm dreaming." Julian stepped closer, voice steady. "You're not dreaming, Malik. This is real. And it's just the beginning." Malik turned to him, eyes glistening. For the first time, the walls around his heart weren't just cracked, they were gone. "Then I guess," he whispered, "I'm home." Julian's breath caught. No business deal, no empire he'd built, had ever felt like this moment. He placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, gentle but firm. "Welcome home, son." The word son lingered in the air, heavy and beautiful. Malik froze, then blinked rapidly, his face crumpling with emotion. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he stepped forward, wrapping his arms tightly around Julian. Julian held him close, his heart breaking open, knowing this was the family he'd been searching for all along. Liam stirred in his sleep, murmuring both their names, as if binding them together in his dreams. In the weeks that followed, paperwork was filed, guardianship explored, lawyers consulted. But beyond the legalities, something deeper had already taken root. They were a family now. Not by blood, not by wealth, but by choice. Julian, once a lonely CEO locked inside his empire, had found freedom not in power, but in love. Malik, once a boy convinced he was invisible, had discovered that he was seen, chosen, cherished. And Liam, once adrift in his own little storms, now had two anchors to hold him steady. On a quiet Sunday morning, the three of them walked hand in hand through the park. Leaves crunched underfoot, laughter mingled with birdsong. Strangers looked, some with curiosity, some with warmth, but Julian no longer cared. For the first time, he wasn't just living, he was alive. He glanced down at Malik and Liam, their faces bright with joy, and thought, "This is it. This is love at last." Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this one kept you hooked, then you definitely won't want to miss what's coming next. It's even wilder and more fascinating than you can imagine. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to catch the next story.